Ella Wheeler Wilcox said, "'Tis the set of the sails and not the gales that determine the way we go." Today, I would like to share with you the people who helped set Gene's sails in his earlier years. Gene was born to Ellis and Faye Smith on August 10th, 1936, the first of 4 children, followed by 3 sisters, Karma, LaVon, and me. Ellis and Faye were far ahead of their time in realizing the value of an education. They both attended universities of higher learning, and there was never a question that all of their children were going to receive the opportunity to attend college. Gene knew he was college-bound. There were times when my mother and father never did think Gene would ever finish his higher education. I think the term they used around the dinner table was, "Well, he's a professional student." This was probably after 10 years of going to school. In hindsight, we now know that Gene was searching for a degree or academic studies in Tibetan that didn't exist at the time. My parents made sure that he always had his tuition paid at the beginning of each semester, as well as providing several rescue checks throughout the year. And I'm going to say heavy on the rescue checks. Yes, my parents financed not only his education and his passion, but also his parties. Many of you who know Gene knew that he could throw a party. Family stories report that at least on one occasion, he spent his tuition money on a party instead of paying for tuition. Needless to say, that didn't go over very well with Faye and Ellis. There may have been other avenues available for Gene to complete his schooling, but my parents are credited with making his life a lot easier. There are many semesters that Gene didn't have to work, and my parents wanted him to spend his time studying. Faye always told each of us, "You come with a record to play." Her theory in child rearing was to help each of us play our own record. We didn't go a day without our mother telling us that we could accomplish anything that we set our minds to. Faye was the wind beneath Gene's wings, and she was also the wind behind his sails. Their relationship was unexplainable. I became a believer in past life relationships when I would watch them interact. She was his number 1 cheerleader, but she always made sure that he stayed grounded. She didn't let him get puffed up, as she called it. If it is true that behind every man is a woman, then Faye was that woman. They could sit for hours and talk. Faye was probably the only person who really knew Gene deeply. Gene suffered a tremendous loss when Mom made her transition. Our family knew early on that Gene was destined for greatness. He mastered all the Romance languages to include Latin before he graduated from high school. He always carried vocabulary cards in his pocket of his latest language. As you well can imagine, one hasn't lived until you've played Scrabble with Gene. He always knew where to put the X's and the Z's for the triple word scores both ways. We all suffered non-stop wipeouts. He knew every Latin word in the dictionary, and I got so sick of him putting fee, fi, fo, fum to always get 2 words with every turn. Even though he was a pacifist in his life, he loved ROTC. Since Gene was always our babysitter, he would practice all his military commands on us. Attention, at ease, about face, Well, Karma and Levon soon mutinied and went AWOL, and they didn't want to have anything to do with his command. Well, that left me to execute all his commands by myself. My contribution to Gene's life is that he learned early on that he could bark orders and get results. And some of you who have worked with him, I'm sure, realized his barking. I call him Big Dog to this day. ROTC did teach him discipline, which was a necessary ingredient for his future success. When it became apparent that Gene was not going to follow the Mormon faith into adulthood, it didn't make any difference to my parents. They just knew that he was playing his record. If each of us offered the same unconditional love that my parents extended to Gene, the world would know greater love and greater peace. After Gene's death, I wrote the following: To Gene, my big brother. There was never a dull moment sharing childhood and adulthood with you. You were everything that a big brother is supposed to be, plus some. The tease, the tormentor, yes, and also the teacher. I will miss the dish towel fights we had while we were drying Mom's dishes. I will miss the movie and Broadway play marathons. I will miss the constant bantering when we discuss politics or religion. I will miss playing Rummikub, yes, and even the Wipeout Scrabble games. I will miss all the shared vacations. I will miss visiting you in foreign lands. I will miss watching you watch CNN 24/7. I will miss your little fits when you couldn't get the remote to work, or when you couldn't get the printer to print every time you would come for a visit. I will miss seeing you interact with our nieces and our nephews. I will miss seeing the tears and the sadness in your eyes. Every time you saw someone in need. I will miss watching your generosity. I will miss arguing with you about who is going to pay the restaurant tab. I'm sure many of you have had that argument. Most of all, I will miss all of those moments of shared heart talk. Gene, I will forever miss who you are, not just what you have done. Love forever and always, your little sister. In closing, I would like to quote George Adams, a renowned newspaper columnist, who said, "There is no such thing as a self-made man. We are all made up of thousands of others. Everyone who has ever done a kind deed or spoken a word of encouragement to us has entered into the makeup of our character, our thoughts, and ultimately our success. Each of you who sit in this beautiful cathedral today, in spirit or in form, has contributed to Gene's success and accomplishments. Philosophers will continue to debate what really makes up the fabric of a man. Karma, heredity, environment, divine calling, foreordination, or maybe even predestination. The question will not be answered anytime soon. As Gene's biological family, we want to thank each of you who became his family of choice in his later years. We want you to know how grateful we are that you touched his life and contributed to his success.